Hi, friends. So I want to talk just very briefly about the persecution of Max Blumenthal and the Grey Zone. The Grey Zone is an independent, left-leaning journalist online site, and they do lots of reporting from Latin America and just about the U.S. empire, really. So, and the imperialist aims of the U.S. empire. And Max Blumenthal has written a book, The Management of Savagery, and I think you'd find that very interesting if you haven't looked at it already. So Max Blumenthal was on Daniel Dumbrell's site, and Danny Dumbrell lives in China, and so he's worth checking out. And he was interviewing, he gives some thoughtful commentary about living in China and about the ramping up of the imperialist rhetoric, warmongering basically against China. He talks about that. And he's interviewing various independent journalists, I've noticed, of recent times, and Max Blumenthal is one of those. And Max was talking about some of the recent sort of persecution by the state against himself personally and against the Grey Zone. And then I want to point out something that Ben Norton talked about on the Escrow Hour about the persecution of the Grey Zone by Wikipedia. I've talked about that already. I hope that this audio is not too bad. I'm just using my headset, and it mightn't be very good quality, so I apologize for that. But so let's have a listen to what Max Blumenthal says, and please excuse me if I get a bit klutzy about this.
Of your respect for nonviolence. Speaking of how you've been seem to be silent, they're trying to silence you in terms of not allowing trying to block your book, and nobody wanting to listen to you on debunking Pompeo's kind of lab-made virus thing. The other thing that happened, right, was, and not much media covered this also, I think Rolling Stones covered it, but you were arrested under very suspicious circumstances, and it was that you were armed and dangerous, which only shows up, I think you said, on 2% of arrest warrants.
Yep.
And you don't really seem like an armed and dangerous person to me. But do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like what happened and what's going on with it? Because I'm sure, hopefully you have some updates for now. Hopefully you've got some positive movements on that.
Well, the charges were dropped a few weeks after I was arrested in October. But I was arrested 5 months after I committed the horrible atrocity of delivering food to people and sanitary supplies to people inside the Venezuelan embassy who were protesting an attempt to take it over by the illegal criminal white-collar mafia of Juan Guaido. And the embassy was surrounded by these hooligans, these violent right-wing hooligans who were just truly violent and racist and homophobic, who were associated with the Venezuelan opposition. They were part of the Venezuelan diaspora here in the Washington area. And they were being used as a proxy force by the Secret Service, the police of the State Department, to do what they were not legally allowed to do, which was to attack us and try to wage this psychological war on the people inside the embassy. And so when we delivered the food, it was actually us who were attacked. I didn't come into physical contact with anyone. And then they found some 59-year-old woman I'd never met before. And there's video all over the place of her attacking people all the whole day before. Just someone who's clearly unhinged. And, she alleged that I had brutally beaten her with some other guys and that we threw her against a wall and kneed her and she was fighting for her life. She completely lied. The whole thing was a lie. Nothing happened to me, though. One person who was with me, Ben Rubenstein, he was arrested the next day because he showed up at the protest. But beyond that, no one came to my house and arrested me. They could have come at any point. I went in and out of the country. I even went to Syria and came back, and I was never arrested. There was no warrant. And for whatever reason, the warrant was authorized 5 months later, and I was listed as armed and dangerous. And I woke up one morning with my house surrounded by police, them demanding to come in and saying they're going to break down my door. And then I was thrown in jail for 2 days because I was one of the first people in. I was the first person in jail that day and the last person out like 48 hours later. And it was not a pleasant place to be. I'm sure at this
point. Wow. Yeah, that's quite an experience, and an interesting way that it's a new method methodology for trying to silence you. But it's good to hear that that's all. I mean, I guess they didn't really have a case, did they? So
I really wish that I could, I could strike back somehow and seek some kind of legal recourse, but I'm not sure if that's going to be possible. I was just lied about. The DC police made no effort to investigate this. I would like to, find out how that warrant got authorized, but all the power is on their side. All the resources are on their side. I'm not going to be able to pay for some lawyer for months and months.
Yeah.
Then you saw just like a who's who of all of these sort of State Department leftists and blue checkmark neocons and think tankers and foreign policy's China correspondent, James Palmer. They were all celebrating my arrest and insisting that I was guilty, that I must have beaten up an old woman. They were just so happy. And it just shows how much they believe in democracy themselves. I mean, they just want to see their enemies silenced and jailed. They're perceived enemies.
Right.
What's the answer to that? How do you get back at that? Like, what can you do to them? Like, pretty much, you just have to endure. But it really, I thought, in some ways, it exposed how unfair this whole system is, and for a lot of people who hadn't been looking at it closely enough. And for me, I mean, I live in Ward 8 in DC. It's the poorest district in the city. It's the most monolithically black. And, I know what goes on here, and I grew up in this city, but to see it from inside the jail and to really get to spend time with guys who are like my neighbors who are just jailed constantly in and out for the most absurd minor charges, basically for being poor, and seeing the kind of the ringer they're constantly put through in this system.
Right.
Until they get ankle bracelets and they have to walk around with ankle bracelets. One guy held up his bracelet and was like, "This is modern day slavery. What do you think this is? This is just the new chains." And then they get put in, maximum security prisons eventually. It really opens your eyes to what just millions of people who are totally voiceless and who are being basically used as slave labor in prisons. And I think it informs the current protest moment in the U.S.
Hopefully this movement will kind of get an important conversation going. But what I'm curious about in terms of what happened to you with your book and everything like that, and considering what goes on around the world with obviously with Julian Assange, who was essentially just a journalist as well. Do you ever worry about eventually crossing a certain line where you're going to be targeted even more or put yourself at risk even more? Does that ever cross your mind, or do you think you're still pretty safe in that regard?
I mean, being arrested isn't the only abuse of the legal system against me or the Gray Zone. There's lawfare efforts that are ongoing against us, which are coordinated. I believe there's a coordinated effort to get me and everyone associated with the Gray Zone investigated by the FBI to get us jailed under the Espionage Act to use Assange as a precedent. That's really all I can say for now, but I'll hopefully have a chance to expose a lot of this in the future. But the Trump era has really caused a huge degeneration in whatever veneer of sort of civil liberties and democracy there existed in the U.S. And so it's real. And it is a concern, but everything we do is in the open, and all we do is journalism. Yeah. So I shouldn't have anything to be concerned about.
Right.
And
so on that note, what's that?
You just got to keep going and let the chips fall.
So that's something I wasn't aware of. Somebody pointed this out to me the other day, that he had mentioned that. And this is where this incident with Julian Assange, who is a publisher journalist, who basically through WikiLeaks has exposed the crimes of the state, the warmongering, the war crimes. War is a crime, but these specific instances through Chelsea Manning in particular with the collateral murder video, and Chelsea Manning paid dearly for that and continues to pay. And Julian Assange, of course, will probably pay with his life. And this has opened the floodgates. And not a lot of journalists in the West, if you can call them journalists, they're more like stenographers. These stenographers in the West do not seem to get it, that the extradition of Julian Assange, which is most likely going to happen, is going to open the floodgates for the persecution of other journalists, and they will go for the ones that are most effective, like the Grey Zone and the other journalists who I mention regularly on Faint Signals from Vega. And so this is disturbing, and I have a feeling that when Trump gets in, again, if he gets in, and it is looking like he may not get in because he's made such a mess of this COVID-19 pandemic response. But if he did get in, just say if through election fraud, and there's a lot of that goes on in the federal elections and the state elections in the United States, they really need transparency and oversight from the international community, but that's never going to happen. But so if he does get in, if it's a case of electoral fraud, or if people are basically unhinged again and decide that they're going to try him again because the Democratic Party has offered nothing to them, which is true, and so they go F you to the Democratic Party and just vote him in again, which is possible. Or if there's electoral fraud, as I mentioned, and he gets in because machines can be remotely hacked and all that goes with it, the suppression of voters and all of that. So if he gets in, this could be really, really frightening. When he first got in, I remember writing to some independent journalist, I think it was Avi Martin, and sort of said, you really need to get out of the country. When he did that Muslim ban, the first thing he did was dog whistle to the right and show them what he was, that he was going to do, the things that he said he was going to do. And he dog whistled to the right, and then he did the Muslim ban. And I wrote to Avi Martin and said, you really need to get out of the US. This is the sort of thing that, fascists do. There's 14 points of fascism, which I've talked about on this channel. You can look them up. And one of the characteristics, of course, is clamping down on anybody who is exposing the state, exposing war crimes, exposing the corruption, etc. And, of course, journalists are at the top of that list, and academics. And when Hitler came to power, before he came to power, and that could be seen coming, people started leaving Germany. They started escaping before he actually really got into power, because they could see the writing on the wall. The writing on the wall is very clear, and you only have to look at Donald Trump's 4th of July speech. He appeals to the lowest common denominator of thought. And he's a neo-fascist, and he will do, I feel, whatever it takes to stay in power. And when he gets in power, of course, he won't have to appease his base anymore, the right-wing white nationalists, so he will do whatever he wants to do. But because fascism works so well in keeping power, there's going to be some changes that are going to be quite frightening, even for the stupid liberals, the US Democratic Party, who I don't know if they really realize what they've helped unleash here by their complete lack of being an alternative, by basically propping up and giving him more power. They basically, every time he puts up a military spending bill or something that suppresses free speech, etc., the US Democratic Party help him do that. And I don't know, though, if they really realize what they're unleashing here, because even if Donald Trump doesn't get in this time, this has opened the door to other people that are probably more eloquent than him, and that doesn't take much to surpass Donald Trump with how clumsy he is and how he needs a teleprompter, otherwise he sounds like a complete idiot. But it has opened the door for people that are a lot more eloquent than him, who are real full-on fascists, to run for office and get in, and they will be helped in by the billionaires and by Silicon Valley, by anybody who stands to gain from that. So anyway, if you've seen any of this by Donald Trump, this full speech at Mount Rushmore, some of the things he says are quite frightening. So let's just see if we can spot some of them. But basically the whole speech he gives is a nod to his right-wing base. And he says stuff that's basically saying that he's going to do his best to stomp on and smash the left, anybody who is left-leaning. And he basically separates them from the American public as if there's some aberration that isn't American.
And yet, as we meet here tonight, there is a growing danger that threatens every blessing our ancestors fought so hard for, struggled, they bled to secure. Our nation is witnessing a merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and indoctrinate our children.
See how he's saying basically that anybody who is against white supremacy and the genocide of people, First Peoples here in the country, are basically traitors to the country. They're treasonous. And he's making out as if this is not American. He's making out basically that free speech is not American. Listen to the crowd there. Listen to them booing. I mean, see, this is the sort of... People don't realize this, but you don't have to be wearing swastikas on your arm. You don't have to be wearing a hood to be a real threat to the planet and to your own citizens. He will be assisted by people that will turn into brown shirts and have already turned into brown shirts.
Angry mobs are trying to tear down statues of our founders, deface our most sacred memorials, and unleash a wave of violent crime in our cities. Many of these people have no idea why they're doing this, but some know exactly what they are doing. They think the American people are weak and soft and submissive. But no, the American people are strong and proud, and they will not allow our country and all of its values, history, and culture to be taken from them.
You don't need to wear a swastika on your arm and be saluting Heil Hitler. These are the same kinds of values which helped Hitler rise to power. I'm not saying that Trump is Hitler, but this is the sort of thing, this sets the stage for future people who may be exactly like Hitler and who will round up left journalists like Max Blumenthal and kill them or throw them in prison and throw away the key, just like they're doing with Julian Assange. We're already seeing this already with the likes of Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, with just throwing people in Gitmo who haven't even had a trial, who are there languishing, rotting in that prison. The NDAA is a way of basically, it allows American citizens to be imprisoned without any counsel indefinitely and even assassinated. And the United States has, the national security state via Barack Obama, has actually already assassinated 2 American citizens. This sort of setting the stage here and actually separating, calling the American public separate from anybody who was against white supremacy, who was against US imperialism. Anything that is going to interfere with corporate interests is actually an enemy of the state. And this is something that, this speech, you must watch it, it's very scary. And have a look at the way he demonizes the left in this.
One of their political weapons is cancel culture.
What was that? Was he going to applaud himself for something there?
Driving people from their jobs, shaming dissenters, and demanding total submission from anyone who disagrees. This is the very definition of totalitarianism. And it's...
Good God, he can't even say totalitarianism properly. Okay, so cancel culture. I don't know if you saw my recent video about cancel culture and how the real cancel culture is actually how the faux liberal left and the right wing are basically trying to silence any sorts of journalism. And this is why I'm focusing on not just only Max Blumenthal and the Grey Zone, but the Empire Files with Abby Martin, the Mint Press News, Media Roots Radio, all those different ones. There's ways of silencing the left without actually taking them out behind a alley and beating the crap out of them, or throwing them in prison, or assassinating them, or having them put in prison like Julian Assange so that hopefully he will die. There are various ways of doing that. And the cancel culture of today is the algorithms and the Silicon Valley which are doing their best to suppress any dissent against US imperialism and US empire by putting in algorithms that basically will suppress those particular voices from being seen online in search engines. They end up being 20 pages down, and all the usual suspects are at the top. So that's the cancel culture the real cancel culture of today. So I've talked about that. Now I wanted to share something because Donald Trump is a neo-fascist, and he's talking about the left as if they're some sort of traitors to the cause, traitors to the United States. And it's from Chris Hedges' book, The Farewell Tour, America, The Farewell Tour. And he said, and this is sort of what this is leading to, this sort of vilifying of the left and vilifying of dissent of white supremacy. A 22-year-old neo-Nazi had plowed into his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, injuring 19 and killing 1. The scene of the crash was blocked off with yellow police tape. A pale young woman with brown hair, later identified as Heather Heyer, was motionless, seated on the ground, her back against a building. Several people surrounded her. Her eyes were closed. Her face was expressionless. She was dead. When Vaughan, this is the fellow he was talking to in his book, when Vaughan learned that the counter-protester had been killed, and this is at the Unite the Right march they had in Charlottesville. When Vaughan learned the counter-protester had been killed, he said nothing. Someone else muttered, "Good." The Unite the Right organizer, Jason Kessler, later tweeted, Heather Heyer was a fat, disgusting communist. Communists have killed 94 million. Looks like it was payback time, end quote.
It is completely alien to our culture and to our values, and it has absolutely no place in the United States of America.
So dissent has no place in the United States of America. By the way, I've sped this up because it gets a bit ponderous.
This attack on our liberty, our magnificent liberty, must be stopped, and it will be stopped very quickly. We will expose this dangerous movement, protect our nation's children, end this radical assault, and preserve our beloved American way of life. In our schools, our newsrooms, even our corporate boardrooms, there is a new far-left fascism that demands absolute allegiance. If you do not speak its language, perform its rituals, recite its mantras, and follow its commandments, then you will be censored, banished, blacklisted, persecuted, and punished. It's not going to happen to us.
This is funny because the far left, but by the way, I don't think you can have far left fascism, but the far left, the real left, can't really censor this man or alt-right nationalists. The liberal faux left, those who are almost rabidly against those who are anti-imperialist, who basically belong to the Democratic Party and who are holding up the establishment and also giving funding for military adventures to Donald Trump, those people doing their best to vilify Trump at every turn, no matter if he ever does anything good, which is not very usual, but they're so anti-Trump that every single thing that he does and everything to do with Trump, even propping up unhinged people like John Bolton, if it means that they can vilify Trump, that's what they're doing. So unhinged that they would rather prop up people like John Bolton if it means that they can vilify Trump, even though John Bolton is a liar and is so dysfunctional. But anything that they can get their hands on that smears Donald Trump, they will, even though he's done so many things that they could actually criticize him in a real way, like the genocide in Yemen, the assassination of Soleimani, all sorts of different things. There's so many things that he's done. His nepotism, his using his position to gather wealth for himself, putting in judges, right-wing judges that will not will probably basically help him when he returns to civilian life, and there are so many lawsuits against him that will come in handy. There's so many things that he's done that are actually impeachable things, and yet they focus on these trivial things and also invent a whole thing about Russiagate. So those are the people that he should be aiming at, of course, and he does. But in this speech, he's actually talking about people, everyday people who are protesting against white supremacy, who are protesting against more than that, really, about the way that the government has completely abandoned the civilian population during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Our people have a great memory. They will never forget the destruction of statues and monuments to George Washington.
George Washington was a landowner who would actually steal land from indigenous people and then sell it. He was a slave owner.
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln had his problems as well.
Ulysses S. Grant.
Ulysses. He can't even say the name. See, if he didn't have a teleprompter, he'd be if he didn't have a teleprompter, he'd be completely clueless. But even with a teleprompter, he obviously apparently Stephen Miller, who's just a real problem. He actually probably wrote this speech for Trump, and he's a scary character who I'm sure is going to run for president one day. But I think these people his advisors just put a speech in front of him, and he doesn't even read it through.
Abolitionists and many others. The violent mayhem we have seen in the streets and cities that are run by liberal Democrats in every case is the predictable result of years of extreme indoctrination and bias in education, journalism, and other cultural institutions. Against every law of society and nature, our children are taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes, but that were villains.
This is a denial of the past, revisionism. And this is what, in the Weimar Republic and leading up to Hitler, you just deny your past. It's magical thinking. You look back nostalgically at things that were done in the name of white supremacy and genocidal things. You just revise the whole thing.
The radical view of American history is a web of lies. All perspective is removed. Every virtue is obscured. Every motive is twisted. Every fact is distorted. And every flaw is magnified until the history is purged and the record is disfigured beyond all recognition.
And P.S. History is written by the victors. History is written by people who have conquered other places, raped and pillaged.
This movement is openly attacking the legacies of every person on Mount Rushmore. They defile the memory of Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. Today, we will set history and history's records straight.
What a weird man he is.
Before these figures were immortalized in stone, they were American giants.
Anyhow, I'm going to move forward on this one.
No movement that seeks to dismantle these treasured American legacies can possibly have a love of America at its heart. Can't happen. No person who remains quiet.
Yes, because, dissent is supposed to be, in America, it's supposed to be a highly held and respected thing. It's supposed to be that. But it certainly isn't now. I hate the word patriotism, but it's supposed to be patriotic to push against things that are wrong, that's what it's supposed to be. If you actually care about your country, you want to see everybody do well. And therefore dissenting is, in quotes, patriotic, or it's a good thing to do. But it's certainly not now, certainly not the US Democratic Party. It's only okay to dissent if you hate Donald Trump and you're talking about Donald Trump. That's a great thing to do. Everything else about imperialism and warmongering, not a great thing. And the same with this guy.
Make no mistake, this left-wing cultural revolution is designed to overthrow the American Revolution.
The American Revolution was a counter-revolution. Part of it was to prevent slavery from ending, basically.
The very civilization that rescued billions from poverty, disease, violence, and hunger and that lifted humanity to new heights of achievement, discovery, and progress. To make this possible, they are determined to tear down every statue, symbol, and memory of our national heritage.
Every symbol of white supremacy and genocide.
True. That's very true, actually.
Not on my watch. Not on my watch, that's what somebody said. And he said, that's very true. He was actually he's goading them on. He's actually, it's a problem. It's a real big problem. He cannot get back in. I'm not suggesting Joe Biden, because that man is another Republican and he may not be as crass as Trump, but everything that this government does, whether it's the US Democratic Party or Donald Trump and the Republicans, it's all just enabling a continuation of a slow creep to fascism, which actually Donald Trump would make it a lot faster. But this is what it's all, when you're overthrowing, 50 plus, 60 plus countries' governments since 1945 and basically destroying countries left and right, killing millions of people, doing it on lies, like the war on lies, the WMDs with Iraq, and now with China. They're trying to find anything they can possibly find to have a war on China, whether it's blaming them for the COVID-19 outbreak or whatever it is. Surveillance, 5G, all this kind of thing. They're grasping for straws with the Chinese thing, and I think that at some point they'll do some sort of possible 9/11 type style thing in relation. They're trying to make out that the COVID-19 thing is a sort of a 9/11 from China. I don't think that that's sticking, particularly since the science suggests that in Brazil there was already in the sewer COVID-19 since November. In Italy there was evidence in the sewerage that COVID-19 existed from December. But that, never let the truth get in the way of a good lie.
That is why I am deploying federal law enforcement to protect our monuments, arrest the rioters, and prosecute offenders to the fullest extent of the law.
Look how happy everybody is. See, they're happy because there's a sort of a civil war, an approaching civil war in that country, where the white nationalists, who are a lot of them completely ignorant, think that the left is to blame for their situation when it's right in front of them. Donald Trump is in this speech. Is Donald Trump suggesting I'm going to bring in Medicare for all during a pandemic for you all? I don't even know. I'm not sure who's in this audience, but I'm sure they're not rolling in money. Is he suggesting that is he suggesting that he's really going to end the wars? I suppose he's going to pretend like he's going to do that again, even though he's actually escalated. There's been more carnage since he's been in office. There's nothing anti-imperialist about him. He's as warmongerish and hawkish as any of those other presidents. Is he suggesting anything for these people that is going to improve their lives? No. What he's suggesting is crushing and vilifying the left and demeaning them as if they're not even part of the American public. And this is actually encouraging a kind of a civil war between, and also causing division through blaming the people rather than and getting people to think about other people as the problem, like immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers and leftist journalists and all of that. All these markers of fascism are being displayed in this speech. And this is what he's doing, and he's appealing to and dog whistling to all his base, even though I don't think that's going to save him in the end. He's done such a terrible job during this pandemic. I don't think all the dog whistling in the world isn't going to save him, and it seems like the numbers are showing that he's probably not going to win. But, as I said, you can have election fraud, remotely hacking machines, you can do all sorts of things. A week, even in political terms, is like an eternity. A lot can happen between now and the federal election.
Thank you. I am pleased to report that yesterday...
Yay, 4 more years, and we'll have the left completely crushed, and we'll throw them in prison and shoot black people on sight wherever they show up. I mean, they're not doing Heil Hitler salutes, and he doesn't have a swastika on his arm. But look at US empire over the decades. I mean, they may not be, sort of goose-stepping into Poland, but they're basically invading countries left and right, or trying to invade them. They're the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet today. As Martin Luther King said 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago. And it's true today, but more so. And since 9/11, it's escalated tremendously. It's given them carte blanche to just do whatever they want, basically, in the name of surveillance and security.
Federal agents arrested the suspected ringleader of the attack on the statue of the great Andrew Jackson in Washington, D.C. And in addition, hundreds more have been arrested. Under the executive order I signed last week pertaining to the Veterans Memorial Preservation and Recognition Act and other laws, people who damage or deface federal statues or monuments will get a minimum of 10 years in prison.
10 years in prison for graffitiing a statue. And listen to the applause.
And obviously that includes our beautiful Mount Rushmore.
And Mount Rushmore was actually created by somebody who was very closely tied to the KKK. Now look at what this unhinged neo-fascist has to say next.
No movement that seeks to dismantle these treasured American legacies can possibly have a love of America at its heart. Can't happen. No person who remains quiet at the destruction of this resplendent heritage can possibly lead us to a better future. The radical ideology attacking our country advances under the banner of social justice. But in truth, it would demolish both justice and society.
So basically another attack on the left. This is just a big attack on the left, this 4th of July speech. And making out that they're responsible for the decline of the US empire, basically, the decline of the USA. It's a worry.
It would transform justice into an instrument of division and vengeance, and it would turn our free and inclusive society into a place of repression, domination, and exclusion.
Isn't that amazing? Oftentimes everything that these people say about other groups and other countries is really what the US is doing to its own people and to other countries. Talking about repression and exclusion, oh my goodness. I mean, he's trying to turn everything back to the 1950s in relation to social justice and civil rights. And the reason why these groups exist, like Black Lives Matter, black groups that are trying to push a left agenda, all of that is because black people have been so oppressed since the inception of this country, since the inception of the United States. And the reason why so many groups exist, like LGBT groups, is because they've been oppressed and they've been organizing to try and get rights for themselves. This should be clear to anybody with any intelligence, but this is a sort of another example of just lying and more lies, more revisionist history, and not being able to hold the mirror up in front of oneself. And James Baldwin, the author, talks about this, how until the United States can actually accept their own terrible genocidal white supremacist past, they're always going to be projecting their hate onto others. They're always going to be dysfunctional until they can actually own their own past.
What is he? I don't know what white people see, when they look at a Negro anymore. But I do know very well that I realized when I was very young that whatever he was looking at, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was something he was afraid of. It was something to which he was attracted or which he found repulsive. It seems to me that it's a reflection, direct reflection, of the effort made by the white American to keep away, to not be threatened by black people. In some way, the American vision of the world is all wrapped up with their vision of black men, which has to do with their vision of themselves. Black is evil. The saved are white. Now, there's certainly a thread which connects this reality to, which makes it possible for the Secretary of State to say, we will not do business with the devil. In a way, black men were very useful to the American, because in a country so absolutely undefined, so amorphous, where there were no limits, no height really, and no depth, there was one thing which one could be certain. One knew where one was by knowing where the Negro was. You knew that you were not on the bottom because the Negro was there. You knew, one knows what sin is in the same way. One knows what danger is in the same way. Now, this implies a vision of oneself, it seems to me, and a vision of the world which doesn't stop at the American borders. It is also the way America deals with the world. It must, cannot possibly avoid moving directly into the heart of the people who make up America. I mean that the problem will never be resolved until everybody in the country, in some way, I know how impossible this sounds, however, this is what has to happen, is somehow able to do without this crutch. If I were going to describe, I can't name names, so a hypothetical white liberal, well, I know what he thinks he's doing. But what he's mainly doing is something which demands my tacit cooperation. I have to agree that I am what he says I am in order for us to have any dialogue at all. Now, if I don't agree that he is what I am what he thinks I am, I think the Americans essentially, I don't think this, I know this. Yes, this is a threat to the American personality as it has so far been constituted. It's a threat to it is a threat to their definition of the world. It is a threat to the way what they think reality is. And I also mean to imply something else. Let me put it personally. It's the safest way to put it. There was something in me, for example, sometimes, and certainly when I was much younger, which resented the assumption on which all these things are based. It assumes that you have something I want, that there really isn't on the basis of it. Just looking at the evidence. Any reason for white people to assume the Negroes want to be like them? And it's very difficult. I have said in effect that white men must give up what is in effect a crutch. So must I.
I mean, look at Germany. They own their own past of Hitler and the Holocaust and all that goes with that. You have to be able to accept your own past. In Australia, we barely accept the past that we have, the genocidal past we have. And with right-wing authoritarian wannabes like Scott Morrison, that's even less likely. The way that we think that we have smoothed over our past is to make an apology in Parliament, like Kevin Rudd did, for a genocide, and then to preface every speech that we do, this is politicians, with showing respect to the elders of the land. These are just superficial token things. And yet there is suicides of 9-year-olds in Indigenous communities here in Australia. Nothing really much has improved, and we're just basically paying lip service to Indigenous people here.
They want to silence us, but we will not be silenced.
They want to silence us? Who the hell is he talking about now? I mean, these are the American people who are wanting to have, they don't want their own people to be murdered by the police. They don't want to be living hand to mouth. They want to be able to have health care. They want to be able to have the things that governments are supposed to provide. Governments are not there to look after corporations. They're supposed to be They were elected. They're public servants. They're supposed to be serving the people. And this is the problem with this inverted totalitarianism that the United States has going on. The corporations are calling the shots, and people are irrelevant. USA, USA, USA. What the hell is that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will state the truth in full, without apology. We declare that the United States of America is the most just and exceptional nation ever to exist on earth. We are proud.
See, that's a scary lie. American exceptionalism. The most just. These are just lies. Because in reality, it is not true. But this is the thing. They are absolutely deluded. It's delusional talk, propping up the dysfunction.
Proud of the fact that our country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and we understand that these values have dramatically advanced the cause of peace and justice throughout the world.
That's a dog whistle to the Christian fascists.
We know that the American family is the bedrock of American life. We recognize the solemn right and moral duty of every nation to secure its borders. We must take care of America first. It's time.
There you go. There's a nod to the KKK and the white nationalists. America First. That used to be a slogan of the KKK. I saw a coin with America First. Racial purity.
We believe in equal opportunity, equal justice, and equal treatment for citizens of every race, background, religion, and creed.
And that's just a lie. He's trying to take away everything. He's been disenfranchising trans people. He's trying to stop gay people again from adopting. I mean, it's insane.
Every child of every color, born and unborn, is made.
And there's a nod to the Christian fascists and the evangelical Christians, born and unborn.
In the holy image of God.
He doesn't care about God. What is he talking about? I mean, only deluded people could believe anything that comes out of his mouth. But then look at what Joe Biden comes out with. They're both delusional. It's not just a one-party problem. This duopoly is just one big war party. They tell lies to the public. I don't know who believes them, but obviously some do. And if it's in their interest to believe them.
We will never abolish our police or our great Second Amendment, which gives us the right to keep and bear arms.
And there's a nod to the NRA and to the white nationalists again. The Second Amendment, that was created for the militias who were going around putting down uprisings of slaves and also killing indigenous people and taking their land. That's what the militias were. And the militias eventually became the KKK, and the KKK eventually became the police, the wardens, etc.
We believe that our children should be taught to love their country, honor their history, and respect our great American flag.
Yes, and they do that every morning. Poor children are indoctrinated to love their flag. And God, one nation under God. I mean, it's appalling. Somebody I know who grew up in the United States and who left when Reagan got in, she just refused to say that Pledge of Allegiance.
We stand tall, we stand proud, and we only kneel to Almighty God.
He couldn't give a toss about God.
America. His destiny. In toppling the heroes of 1776, they seek to dissolve the bonds of love and loyalty that we feel for our country and that we feel for each other. Their goal is not a better America. Their goal is to end America.
See? This whole speech is just vilifying the left, vilifying people who want social equality, who want this dreadful capitalist system to end that is basically destroying the lives of millions of people. They want free healthcare, which is something, it's a right. Free healthcare is a human right. They want to live free of oppression, and the imperialist aims of the empire are destroying countries all around the world. These are the things that he's talking about that he says is basically saying they're treasonous and they're anti-American, and he's going to crush those who want that. This is a very scary speech, and I think you probably agree it's a very scary speech. There's no promises of anything for the public. It's all about vilifying and demeaning the left and reassuring these right-wingers in the audience that he is going to do whatever it takes to crush these people who he claims want to end America. What does that mean, end America? Well, to anybody who sees that capitalism, disaster capitalism, which is destroying the lives of millions, if that's what he means by ending America, then yes, and I would actually like to see the US empire fall, which it is doing right now, and that's why it's so dangerous. I would like to see it fall because it is destroying countries all around the world, and it is taking us close to the edge of extinction with its disaster capitalism. Its imperialist aims are destroying countries left and right and leaving us all the much worse off, and there's creating so much violence in the world. Yes, I would like to see the end of empire, and so would so many others, and they know that. And they're actually becoming more and more isolated, and Donald Trump is helping that. And that's one of the reasons the national security state, or as other people call it, the deep state, that's why they really want Donald Trump out of here. Because he's the US empire with the mask taken off, and it's an ugly picture. They want people like Barack Obama, who everybody thinks is kind of benign and just a friendly face. They want a friendly, sweet face on empire while they go around crushing other countries and stealing their resources. They don't want somebody like this who is impulsive and unpredictable.
In its place, they want power for themselves. But just as patriots did in centuries past, the American people will stand in their way, and we will win, and win quickly and with great dignity. We will never let them rip America's heroes from our monuments or from our hearts. By tearing down Washington and Jefferson, these radicals would tear down the very heritage for which men gave their lives to win the Civil War. They would erase the memory that inspired those soldiers to go to their deaths, singing these words of the battle hymn of the Republic. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on.
Oh, brother.
America, the most vibrant and tolerant society in the history of the earth. My fellow Americans, it is time to speak up loudly and strongly and powerfully and defend the integrity of our country.
I don't know. Have you ever heard of a 4th of July speech like this? I don't know. I don't watch these kind of things very much, but this is really something.
As we did 244 years ago, that we will not be tyrannized, we will not be demeaned, and we will not be intimidated by bad, evil people. It will not happen.
Bad, evil people. That's the left again. Bad, evil people. Black people who want the police to stop killing black people, just murdering them in front of everybody for nothing. I mean, that's one of many groups that are being oppressed. USA, USA, USA. Who goes on like that? If we ever start doing that in this country, and it's kind of heading that way with, authoritarian wannabes like Scott Morrison, but if we ever start going, Australia, 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 I would be really frightened. I really would be.
We will proclaim the ideals of the Declaration of Independence, and we will never surrender the spirit and the courage and the cause of July 4th, 1776. Upon this ground, we will stand firm and unwavering. In the face of lies meant to divide us, demoralize us, and diminish us, we will show that the story of America unites us, inspires us, includes us all, and makes everyone free. We must demand that our children...
Good God, makes everyone free. Who wrote this? What? This is just deluded stuff.
Our internet. We settled the Wild West.
And this is where he starts getting into pulling out people's names and saying what makes America great. And one of them he throws in there is Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali would just be rolling his eyes and putting his hands up to his head if he knew that he was being included in this. I mean, he spoke out vehemently against the Vietnam War and said, no Viet Cong ever called me the N-word. And he said he just wasn't going to go over there and kill poor people just because he was told to do that for no reason.
Won 2 world wars, landed American astronauts on the moon, and one day very soon, we will plant our flag on Mars.
Yes, because we're going to imperialize the rest of the universe, because USA, USA, USA.
We gave the world the poetry of Walt Whitman, the stories of Mark Twain, the songs of
Mark Twain was anti-imperialist, and I think Walt Whitman was as well.
Irving Berlin, the voice of Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh, so he throws in a black singer there, even though he's just been saying how black people are evil for wanting to have the police defunded because they're just murdering black people.
The style of Frank Sinatra, the comedy of Bob Hope, the power of the Saturn V rocket, the toughness of the Ford F-150, and the awesome might of the American aircraft carriers.
Aircraft carriers. Oh my God.
Americans must never lose sight of this miraculous story. We should never lose sight of it. Nobody has ever done it like we have done it.
Nobody's ever done it like we have done it. See, this is the dangerousness of American exceptionalism.
So today, under the authority vested in me as President of the United States, I am announcing the creation of a new monument to the giants of our past. I am signing an executive order to establish the National Guard of American Heroes, a vast outdoor park that will feature the statues of the greatest Americans to ever live.
Uh-oh. What's that going to be? That's really scary. More white supremacist KKK people, I guess.
From this night and from this magnificent place, let us go forward united in our purpose and rededicated in our resolve. We will raise the next generation of American patriots. We will write the next thrilling chapter of the American adventure. And we will teach our children to know that they live in a land of legends, that nothing can stop them, and that no one can hold them down. They will know that in America, you can do anything, you can be anything, and together.
There's magical thinking for you. You can do anything, you can be anything. Yes, it's just like what Oprah Winfrey says. All you have to do is want it. All you have to do is try hard and work hard, and you can get that American dream. And we know what George Carlin said about the American dream. There is no such thing as, if you are held down by the state through structural racist policies and law, you are never going to ever be able to do what you want and be able to do what Oprah Winfrey says. No matter how hard you try, it's not going to happen.
Together, we will find unity that no one expected. We will make strides that no one thought possible. This country will be everything that our citizens have hoped for so many years, and that our enemies fear, because we will never forget that the American freedom exists for American greatness, and that's what we have, American greatness. Centuries from now, our legacy will be the cities we built, the champions we forged, the good that we did, and the monuments we created to inspire us all. My fellow citizens, America's destiny is in our sights. America's heroes are embedded in our hearts. America's future is in our hands. And ladies and gentlemen, the best is yet to come.
The best is yet to come. Well, if his last 4 years are anything like what the best is yet to come, then it's going to be one hell of a ride. And as Bette Davis said,
fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.